This is the smoking gun curve. This curve is proof that increasing CO2 emissions into the atmosphere are mostly the result of global human population growth and the sum total of all human activities. This curve was published by the distinguished geologist Norman Newell in 1987 and is based on David Keeling's CO2 measurements on Mauna Loa and global population data rigorously calculated by others. The correlation between CO2 in the atmosphere and the growth of human population is a nearly perfect statistical correlation of 0.9985. There are no current natural causes of CO2, such as volcanic eruptions, that come remotely close to Newell's correlation, period, full stop, end of discussion. Incidentally, in recognition of Norman Newell's huge contribution to petroleum geology, especially in the Permian Basin, Professor Newell was made an honorary member of the CSPG a few years ago during his lifetime. Later, I updated this 1987 Newell curve with data up to 1992, which shows an optimistic and realistic projection to the year 2000 and beyond. Carbon dioxide, measured in the atmosphere, will double in my lifetime if I live long enough, but certainly within the lifetime of my grandchildren. We are now at 385 parts per million of CO2 at a population of 6.7 billion and headed for 500 to 600 parts per million at a population of 9 billion people, which would be catastrophic. It's amazing how much research has gone into making some of the worst decisions. This cartoon of medieval men speaks volumes about the follies of the expensive proposal to build a nuclear power plant located on top of the Peace River Arch. Final conclusions. There should be no longer doubt that humans induce global warming. Serious consequences are already happening and the clock is ticking. Those who promote the folly of extreme development and exploitation of the Alberta oil sands are marching to the drummers of ignorance and greed. We must immediately begin to reduce absolute CO2 emissions, not to the so-called intensity levels. Capturing and storing sequestered CO2 is not a proven mass industry technology to avoid catastrophic consequences for our grandchildren. We are living in a fool's paradise to depend on storing carbon and continue driving our SUVs. Geology is the most overlooked science discipline in understanding the Earth as a natural system. Induced seismicity or human-induced earthquakes are real and can be fatal. Engineers often underplay this phenomenon and related fracturing that can violate integrity of CO2 storage and safety of nuclear energy plants, as well as creating hazards in populated areas. Moving to healthier lifestyles, could reduce greenhouse gas emissions and mitigate global warming. All fossil fuels will eventually be replaced by renewable energy sources. Nuclear energy need not extend beyond its present limits. Old and inefficient nuclear power plants should be decommissioned as soon as possible and avoid being turned into potential weapons of mass destruction. And finally, it would be extremely foolish for a nuclear power plant to be built on or near the seismic impact of the Peace River Arch. Now, the final 3 slides illustrate basic solutions to help develop a transition period of lower carbon conventional oil supplies in the Western Canada Sedimentary Basin. My 1980 paper, Conventional Petroleum Assessments, Facts and Fallacies, documented reasons why there are still abundant conventional oil reserves yet to be discovered in our western basin. Presenting detailed proof of this requires another talk, but not tonight. However, as an example, this slide illustrates the 1977 discovery of light oil in the deep Devonian Nisku Pinnacle Reef Trend underlying the shallower Cretaceous Cardium Formation in the West Pembina oil field area. Now to the explanation of why we're still producing so much bitumen with the biggest carbon footprints in Athabasca oil sands projects. The answer is more about politics than geology and economics. About 30 years ago, major oil companies began walking away from light conventional oil opportunities in our basin. These corporations believed it was no longer profitable to explore and develop conventional oil in our basin. This would require competing with the leaner, more aggressive, small, independent oil companies. Unproven light oil reserves are in the ground, waiting to be discovered by effective exploration and development drilling, mainly in smaller fields and pools in the basin. The discovery of new fields and pools on this vintage oil and gas map are still profitable for smaller companies to explore and produce, but not for major oil companies with huge overhead costs. Entire exploration departments were let go, and many geologists left the oil patch during the 1980s. This resulted in few remaining experienced professionals needed to explore for light conventional oil. The Alberta oil patch has not recovered from this unfortunate problem. This is the situation as it exists today. After 9/11, unstable political conditions in the Middle East threatened global security of supply. From the giant conventional light oil fields in Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Iran, Iraq, the Gulf states, and the Persian Gulf. Strategic geopolitical decisions were then made to exploit the Alberta tar sands at all costs, at the expense of local and global environments. Now, I'll just repeat a bit of my introduction. It was very thorough, but I have a few points to add to that. My 57 years of experience in the oil patch started with Standard Oil of Indiana as a geophysicist in the Anadarko Basin in western Oklahoma. After 2 years in seismic exploration, I was transferred to work the petroleum geology of the Paradox Basin and in other regions on the Colorado Plateau. 50 years ago, I was transferred to Calgary to explore for Devonian reefs in our basin, in the Western Canada Sedimentary Basin, and train Canadian geologists in new geological techniques. Creating quality drilling prospects for conventional oil reserves is still of great interest to me. I've also been involved with environmental projects for more than 25 years. The Bakken light oil plays in North Dakota, Montana, Manitoba, and Saskatchewan are good examples of abundant, proven conventional oil reserves now being discovered by creative geology. This has been made possible with the use of new geophysical drilling and production tools now at work in the Williston Basin. Other examples of increasing energy supplies include the fractured shale gas plays in northeast BC and in a dozen U.S. onshore basins. New oil supplies can only partially replace rapidly depleting conventional reserves. However, these new low-carbon energy supplies can help carry us through a transition period into sustainable energy from economic solar, wind, geothermal, hydro, tidal, and appropriate biomass supplies. I'm convinced now, as I was 36 years ago, when I left Amoco to explore on my own, that there are abundant light oil and natural gas supplies remaining to be discovered in our basin and brought to market. This was carefully documented in my 1980 papers, Conventional Petroleum Assessments, Facts and Fallacies. As lighter oil is brought on stream, we can rationally